Hello and welcome back to the cricket draft. The county championship has begun. We are 1 week in. Some people had good weeks. Some people had bad weeks. My name is Dan Jadzevics. I'm joined by Dan Weston, and we are looking back to game week 1. We're looking ahead to game week 2. But Dan, how are you? How was your first week?
Yeah, mate, enjoyed it, but I'm already a few hundred points behind you after your stunning opening week. Well, I did notice you used your googly 12th man googly. No, but good. Pretty happy with how things went. Just outside the top 1,000, a few hundred points above the average player, and I had no players in the game week 1 dream team, so I think it was a kind of solid team performance rather than anything spectacular. So yeah, pretty happy with everything really, and looking forward to game week 2.
Fantastic. Well, I was carried a bit by Tom Banton, but I was quite happy that it came through. Today we are going to talk. We're going to do this slightly differently today. We're going to provide you with more information as much as we can. Anyway, we're going to look at players that have been subbed in and subbed out. We're going to look at some cheap options for you. We're going to look at things that you might or might not have missed if you haven't had the opportunity to go through all of those scorecards, and a few little tips and tricks that might help you build your team ahead of game week 2. But we'll start with a look back to game week 1, and we'll have a look at that dream team. And it goes as follows. It's Tom Banton, Colin Ackerman, Max Holden, Lewis Rees, Rob Yates, Max Critchley, Zafar Gohar, John Simpson, Keith Dudgeon, Fergus O'Neill, and Josh Tong. That is a dream 11. Nowhere near £100 million. Don't know the exact number, but nowhere near it. And that just proves that you can be really quite funky with your teams this year and provide some points. But Dan, did you have any? You mentioned none of those players were in your 11,
No.
but of your players that you did pick last week, which one worked, or maybe which one didn't? Which was your kind of surprise or your standout?
Yeah, so a couple of positives for me was the match involvement. I think I predicted in last week's show for Ed Barnard, so I think now he's going to be back top 6 and at worst be first change bowler for Worcestershire, particularly in the seam friendly conditions. So I think that he was a good earner for me in terms of points. James Ruse, obviously that massive partnership with Tom Banton, reinforced a good value pick for me. That I think it was 7 million on the dot, and I've noticed now that he's got fairly high ownership as well. So obviously a lot of other people following down that James Rue path. They were the positives. I think the negatives. I had my 3 paces didn't really. You performed to a huge level, apart from Tom Bailey, who did well. Sam Cook, I think almost half the people in the game own Sam Cook right now. I think it's about 44% owned, but didn't really have the impact on what looked a pretty flat pitch against Surrey. But obviously a banker player for me that I'll be reluctant to let go, so I'll probably keep him around for a while. Did a lack of a spinner for me be an issue? And we spoke about that last week. I know you were very strong on that spinner option, and I was a bit more reticent. But looking at the pitches and looking at the conditions, maybe I missed a trick there.
Yeah, I didn't pick one. It was more of a question back to you, really, with regards to the spin options. And I think probably a lot of people would have been missing a spinner through the course of that first game week. I don't think anybody would have predicted the amount of spin that has been bowled on the first game week of the county championship in April, when you expect it to be cloudy, green seamers nipping about. But it was a real kind of anomaly, I think, with the history of what we've had in county championship cricket over the last probably 10 years. But mine, as I mentioned, is Tom Banton. 6.7 million. I said on this a week ago, I said he felt like a steal at 6.7 million. I'll be honest, I didn't foresee him going on to score Somerset's highest ever score in the history of the game at 371, but he racked up 510 points. He's had a little bit of investment. People have really gone in on him, but he's still only owned by 14.1% of teams across the game, which I don't know whether that's a knee-jerk reaction. I don't know whether I don't know whether that's low. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but 510 points from Tom Banton was by far and away my greatest pick from that week. I will be a little bit honest with you, Dan. I did build my initial team on the development app of the game, and when I came around to save it, it didn't actually save, so I had to rebuild it again. But so it looks slightly different by the time we kicked off. But you're allowed to tinker, aren't you? And that's the great thing about the cricket draft with your team, is you can tinker. None of your transfers actually save until the kickoff of the game, so you can swap and change if there's a player injury, if there's a new signing. If you change your mind, that's available for you, and I'm sure that's something you've been up to this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had to make a couple of last-minute changes to my team that I announced on the show last week because players weren't named in the matchday squads. So obviously I was checking the squads on Thursday, and I noticed that the Twitter account at the Cricket Draft has a really handy thread with all of the squads in. So I was checking that regularly, and then maybe a touch of the 10:30 in the morning checking on the day of the game to see the starting 11s as well. But no, that, and I think that's all part of the fun, really, isn't it? Making sure that you've got that coverage. And I mean, out of the 15 players in my squad, I had 14 played,
Yeah,
and
same as me.
and one was in the matchday squad. That was Jaden Denley, who didn't play in the starting lineup. So I think. On a broad point, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more on game week 2 when we look ahead to game week 2, is that having that coverage of options on the bench is mandatory because there's a lot more rotation in 4-day cricket.
Yeah, absolutely right. Particularly with those guys that are running in and bowling quick for 4 days. They are going to be rotated, so it's best to have some decent options about. But let's look ahead to game week 2. And Dan, as you mentioned, a great idea to be following the Cricket Draft across all of the social media channels. This channel, subscribe to it, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of those things, because there are predicted 11s. There are, as you mentioned, team sheets. There is so much information that you can get from the Cricket Draft to make sure that maybe you don't fall into one of these categories. We're going to start with the players that have been most signed and most released by managers over the course of game week 1 to game week 2. And the most players coming in: Tom Banton, Liam Dawson, Tazim Ali, James Rew and Keaton Jennings. Liam Dawson, Tazim Ali, both spinners coming in as one of the most signed options, as we mentioned, a surprise. But you're quite a big fan of Tazim Ali, I believe.
Yeah, well, I've been keeping an eye on him for a little while after him and Farhan Ahmed both performed really well for the England under-19s a couple of years ago in World Cup, and yeah, I'm really really positive about his career trajectory, particularly as obviously Warwickshire are giving him game time at this early stage of the season as well. So he looks to steal at 4 million. Yeah, and as I mentioned, James Rew, I was always strong on at 7, and you can see that there's a big change in ownership for him in terms of people investing in James Rew for game week 2 and beyond as well. So, and Keaton Jennings is another player I've also got in my squad as well.
Yeah, he's going back to Old Trafford, isn't he? Which I dare say will find his life slightly easier than what maybe people thought they would have done at the home of cricket last week. Going out, though, there are some big, expensive players heading out of people's teams this week. Dan Worrell has been given the chop. David Bedingham given the chop. Kane Williamson and James Anderson all given the chop, with a bit of Rocky Flintoff in there as well. But I think that just proves that it is difficult to have that team built and set, but actually just keep an eye on what's going on, because maybe some of those players weren't aware that Kane Williamson wouldn't have been there for Middlesex on game week 1, along with David Bedingham and obviously the injury to James Anderson. So if you are following the Cricket Draft, then you will get the best possible chance to see whether these players are or aren't available. Injuries, availability, new signings, predicted 11s, all of that good stuff. But there were some things that you might have missed. Not everybody has the ability to go through and look through scorecards and see what's going on, but there are a few standouts here for some real kind of good options, I think, for players. But Dan Lawrence, 7.9 million, owned by 13.5% of players. He is a batter in the game. He bowled 35 overs versus Essex. Lewis Rees, 6.9 million, owned by 2.2% of players, opened the bowling and batted 6, took 10 for, which was quite handy. George Hill did the same role for Yorkshire, 6.6 million, owned by 6.1%. And Ian Holland, 6.9 million, 2.7% owned for Leicestershire, opened the batting and the bowling. Of those players, any of those players catching your eye, or were there any other players that you thought might have had those kind of big roles that you weren't quite expecting?
Yeah, I think that I've definitely noted down a lot of those players already in my research for game week 2. Obviously, Lewis Rees opening the bowling was a bit of a surprise, and taking a 10 for was a bit of a surprise as well. But obviously Derbyshire will probably keep him along in that role. Ian Holland as I think the Leicestershire guys kind of previewed that. I think Chris Wright and Sol Budinger in their preview video did actually call Ian Holland's high match involvement. So credit definitely to those guys. And Dan Lawrence bowling 35 overs against Essex is an interesting one, especially as Surrey have often tended to structure up with a spin option from their batting group only. So that was like Will Jacks, for example, in the past. Obviously, he's not available at the moment because of the IPL, but Dan Lawrence has taken that role and could have high match involvement with both bat and ball. So he becomes a really viable option at 7.9 million as well.
Yeah, and going back to that dream team, 8 of that dream team were owned by less than 7% of players. So there is such a big player pool to choose from, and you can really kind of pick out some diamonds in amongst the entire squads, which is fantastic. There might be some new diamonds though. There are some new faces for game week 2. We do expect to see Blair Tickner back for Derbyshire. He only averaged 58 points per game in 2024, but actually probably will take the new ball for Derbyshire as their box office overseas seamer. Brendan Doggett comes in for Durham. I don't believe he's played a great deal of championship cricket, but it might be worth to see how he settles in. I will throw to you though. Cam Bancroft, 7.8 million. He averaged 113 points per game for Gloucestershire last year and is only owned by 3% of players, but a bit pricey at 7.8 million. Logan Van Beek, 0.5% owned in 2025 as he comes in for Leicestershire. He scored 450 points at 112 points per game in 2024. Jacob Duffy for Worcestershire and Ben Sears for Yorkshire. A few new faces to have a think about for this week.
Yeah, definitely. So a couple of those players catch my eye. Brendan Doggett at Durham had an amazing Sheffield Shield, and I've been reading about his unusual hobby of Ironman participation. So he's obviously going to be someone who's not going to be worried about the county grind, so to speak. He's going to be extremely fit and well conditioned. Logan Van Beek's an interesting one at Leicester for several reasons. I think one is that I actually think he's a better player than a lot of people think, and he could have quite a nice impact in Division Two actually, with both, well, primarily ball, but also with bat. The second point is that Leicester in game week 1 picked a lot of all rounders. So they had Ben Mike, they had Tom Scriven, and they had Ben Green. So does Logan Van Beek's inclusion in their squad constrain the opportunities for one of those guys? And given that I had Scriven in my squad, and I'm considering Ian Holland as well, and Ben Green, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on their squad and their team before making those decisions, I think. Jacob Duffy as well at Worcester. He's now, I think I read he was now ranked number 1 T20 international bowler in the world, which is an interesting one. I know that he had a spell at Kent before as well. I think I want to say 2022, and did okay. So that's a good signing for Worcester. And the other one I think we might have missed there, I think Dane Patterson might be available for Middlesex in game week 2. And he was originally going to be in my team before I noticed that he wasn't available. So I'm expecting him to do a great job for Middlesex in Div 2.
You might have just given away your signing for game week 2 there, or one of them at least anyway. Some cheaper options. There are so many cheaper options available, and so many of these players from, say, 5.5 all the way down to 4 million that would have been involved in game week 1. Just look at Kai Smith taking the gloves for Warwickshire, someone that Dan, that you tipped a couple of weeks ago. But the 3 players stood out really. Rafi Weatherall for Northamptonshire, 4.2%. 4.2 million is Rafi Weatherall. He's owned by 10% of players. I don't know whether that's a budget enabler kind of pick for a lot of people, but he returned 171 points from game week 1 with his 6 wickets against Kent. Andy Gorvin for Glamorgan, 5.4 million, owned by less than 5% of people, 237 points from game week 1, and an average of 130 points per game from 2024. That feels like a really attractive pick to have in the middle of your team and to free up some budget elsewhere. And then Tom Aspinall as well from Lancashire, 4.6 million, 141 points versus Middlesex, and is owned by less than 10% of players. I think, like you mentioned, there are so many good picks for not a lot of cash that you can play around with.
100%. So, give you credit. I think you mentioned Weatherall last week with obviously your little bit of good knowledge of Northants, and the other 2 players are really interesting as well. Andy Gorvin, a guy I know, he's I think very suited to county championship cricket actually, and maybe might be able to contribute some points with the bat as well as the year moves on. Tom Aspinall is a funny one because I actually picked him on my bench for game week 1, and then realised I had 4 Lancs players, so I had to move him out. Yeah, that was a shame. So, but I think I saw that in advance that, yeah, he's going to come in and have some good game time as well, and I think he's a bowler with good potential. So those options, we spoke about Taz Ali, we spoke about Kai Smith, Ben Green, only owned by 2.8% of players and 5.8 million, and batting probably 8 or 9, and having a prominent role with the ball. I think will be a good match involvement player as well. Casey Aldridge had a good game for Somerset, and with again contributes with bat and ball at 6.1 million, and only 2.8% owned. So look, we've got some really good value options who can enable you to buy the Sam Cooks and the Liam Dawsons of this world, who are much more expensive, and still with provide really, high expectation in terms of points. Regularly contributing 100 plus points, which is, I think, what you're going to need to be above average for the game week. Yeah, a whole team of over 100 average
Yeah,
probably needs
absolutely,
to happen.
absolutely. Well, let's get closer to home, and let's talk about the players that we might be, or we will be looking to switch out and change up the teams. Firstly, you've got 2 free transfers per week, 3 penalty transfers, which would cost you minus 75 points if you were to do those, if you needed them. Are you going to make any changes? Firstly, and then if you are, which of those players from your current 11 are the ones that you're looking to switch out, and for who?
It's gonna be for me. It's gonna be just a couple of really, really minor tweaks, and it might not even be anything more than a couple of bench changes. I might consider moving Tom Scriven out for Ben Green, but I haven't committed to that yet. Um, I might look at moving, say, a Booth out from the bench for Warwickshire for someone else. It might just be, like I say, a couple of changes. I don't want to lose my big guns. I don't want to lose a Sam Cook, because the last thing I want to happen is to move out Sam Cook, and then he goes and scores 400 points when he runs through the opposition. So yeah, I think it will be really, really minor tweaks. I definitely won't be losing my 3 Lancs players. They face Northampton. I think it's a bit early to be sort of targeting oppositions, but yeah, that's something I might consider. Definitely won't be losing any Lancs players. So yeah, overall, just some minor tweaks really.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much in the same boat. I've got a bit of a battle here between Luke Proctor and Ian Colland for one of those all-rounder spots. They're both at 6.9 million. There's no real difference there. It doesn't affect my team in any way, shape, or form. Both have pretty similar roles. Luke Proctor in the second innings opened the bowling and opened the batting as well. So they're essentially the same player when it comes to fantasy cricket. But as a matchup, as you just mentioned, Northamptonshire going to Old Trafford doesn't quite look as strong as what Leicestershire have got ahead of them. The only player that I had that didn't play was Chase Simmons for Warwickshire. He was in the squad. He performed really well in 2024, and I think they went with Michael Booth ahead of him. So it would probably just be a case of, can I swap Chase Simmons out? I mentioned before we started recording, I've got £2.5 million to play with that I've not even factored in yet. So is there a seamer out there that I can get for, say, 6.5, 7 million that might just provide me with a bit of extra flexibility? Or do I go for Northamptonshire's Rafi Weatherall at 4.2 million and actually free up maybe another £100,000 for further weeks? But that's where I'm looking. Dan, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to chat with you about county cricket. It's been great to chat with you about the cricket draft. Let us know if you've enjoyed it. Let us know which substitutions you're thinking about making. Make sure you are following the cricket draft across all of the socials. And we'll see you after game week 2 for a preview of game week 3.